The emergency lights flashed red across the Galactic Council chamber. Every seat was filled, something that had not happened in decades. Representatives from 200 species sat in their designated pods, their various forms of anxiety displaying in colors, sounds, and chemical signatures that filled the air with tension. Ambassador Thelkar of the Vryn Dominion stood at the central podium, his 4 eyes blinking in rapid succession. He held a data tablet that trembled slightly in his clawed hands. "They are leaving," he announced, his translator rendering his clicks and whistles into galactic standard. "All of them. Every human in Council space is departing." The chamber erupted into chaos. The sound was deafening as 200 species tried to speak at once. Counselor Rixtala, the ancient Matherian who had led the council for 3 centuries, raised her crystalline appendages for silence. The gesture took several minutes to work. "Explain," Rixtala commanded, her voice like wind through stone. Thelkar touched the tablet, and a holographic display filled the center of the chamber. It showed the human embassy on the council's central world. The building was dark. The landing pads were empty. 48 hours ago, the human ambassador requested a brief meeting. She said only 3 words to me: "We are leaving." Then she walked out. Since then, every human facility in council space has shut down. Every human ship has recalled its crew. Every human citizen has boarded transport vessels. The display shifted to show scenes from across the galaxy. Human trade stations powering down, human medical ships departing mid-mission, human engineers abandoning construction projects, human teachers leaving their classrooms, human diplomats vacating their posts, all of it happening simultaneously, coordinated with precision that made several council members uncomfortable. "This is an outrage." Counselor Brekthor slammed his massive fist against his pod's edge. The Korthan war leader's face flushed deep purple with anger. "They insult us. They throw a tantrum like children." "Did they provide any reason?" Rixtala asked, ignoring Brekthor's outburst. "None," Thelkar replied. "No formal protest, no list of grievances, no demands. They simply activated what they call Protocol Exodus and began leaving. Our intelligence suggests they have been planning this for years. Every human knew exactly where to go and what to do." Counselor Zinara of the Pelthine Consortium leaned forward, her translucent body shimmering with concern. "What about their contracts, their trade agreements, the humanitarian missions they are conducting?" "All terminated," Thelkar said. "They paid every penalty clause in full. They completed no ongoing work. They transferred no knowledge to replacement workers. They left instruction manuals, but only basic ones. Everything else is encrypted or removed. Humans have been part of this council for 200 years, said Counselor Markel, his tentacles waving in agitation. They cannot simply abandon their responsibilities. Rixtala's expression, inscrutable to most species, somehow conveyed deep thought. "What was the last significant council action involving humans?" she asked. The chamber fell silent. Everyone knew the answer. Thelkar cleared his throat. Resolution 8847, passed 36 days ago by a vote of 174 to 2, with 24 abstentions. It placed restrictions on human colonial expansion, limited their resource extraction rights, and imposed quotas on their population growth in council territories. The resolution was necessary. Humans consume resources at an alarming rate. They spread across worlds like a plague. They needed to be controlled. They voted against it, obviously, Zinara noted. Who else? Only the Delphini Unity voted with them, Thelkar said. The Delphini ambassador said the resolution was based on fear rather than facts. She was ignored. Rixtala processed this information. And the humans' response to the resolution? That was the strange part, Thelkar admitted. They said nothing. The human ambassador listened to the vote count, nodded once, and left the chamber. We expected protests, legal challenges, perhaps economic pressure. Instead, They went silent. We thought they were accepting the Council's wisdom. Now we know they were preparing to leave. The display changed again, showing the last human ship crossing the boundary of Council space. It was a massive colony vessel, one of dozens that had departed. The image was time-stamped just 2 hours ago. That was the final human craft, Felkar said. They are all gone now, completely withdrawn from Council space. Our long-range sensors show they are heading toward the galactic northwest into unmapped territories. Good riddance, Brekthor growled. Let them sulk in the darkness. They will come crawling back when they realize they need us more than we need them. Several council members vocalized agreement. Others remained silent, uncertain. Councillor Mursath of the Quilon Federation spoke for the first time, her voice careful and measured. I wonder if we should consider why they left so easily. Humans have been generous partners. They shared technology freely. They responded to every disaster call. They mediated countless disputes, and they asked for very little in return. They asked for expansion rights, Brekthor countered. They wanted to spread everywhere, to take everything. They asked to grow, Mursath corrected gently, like any species, and compared to their population size, their requests were modest. We gave the Friend Dominion twice as much territory for half the population. Felkar's eyes shifted uncomfortably. He did not respond. Rixtala raised her appendages again. What is done is done. The humans have made their choice. We will adapt. Council species have survived for 10,000 years before humans arrived. We will continue without them. Dismissed. The council members filed out of the chamber, most of them satisfied that the human drama would soon be forgotten. A few lingered, staring at the holographic display that still showed the edge of council space, now empty of human vessels. In her private chambers, Rixtala sat in the crystalline throne that had been hers for centuries. She pulled up reports on human activities over the past 200 years. The list was extensive. Humans had participated in over 40,000 council initiatives. They had provided aid to nearly every member species at some point. They had solved problems that others could not. And they had done it all quietly, without demanding recognition or special treatment. She noticed something else in the data. Over the past 50 years, restrictions on human activities had increased steadily. Quotas, limitations, regulations. Each one passed by overwhelming majorities. The humans had complied with every restriction, even as they grew harsher. Resolution 8847 had not been the first insult. It had merely been the last. Rixtala closed the files and sat in darkness. She had a feeling, one she could not name, that the council had made a terrible mistake. But she was a practical leader. Time would tell. If not, the galaxy would move forward without them. Outside her window, the human embassy building stood dark and empty. A silent monument to a departure that had happened without anger, without threats, and without a single word of explanation. The silence, Rixtala was beginning to realize, was the most damning response of all. The first problem appeared 17 days after the humans left. It started small, like most disasters do. Councillor Felkar was in a conference with ambassadors from 3 neighboring systems when his translator suddenly produced gibberish. The device implanted behind his ear had worked flawlessly for 30 years. Now it was telling him that the Pelthine ambassador was discussing purple mathematics and the sound of water's father. Across the council chambers, similar malfunctions were occurring. The Universal Translation Network, the backbone of galactic communication, was developing errors. At first, they were minor. A word translated incorrectly here, a phrase garbled there. Within a week, entire conversations became incomprehensible. The Council's technical teams rushed to fix the problem. They discovered something disturbing. The translation algorithms were far more complex than anyone had realized. The humans had maintained the core systems, updating and refining them constantly. They had left behind basic documentation, but the advanced functions were a mystery. Chief Engineer Boltar, a Korthan technician who had worked alongside human engineers for years, stared at his screen in frustration. "They made it look easy," he muttered to his team. "I watched them work. They would identify problems and solve them in minutes. I thought I understood what they were doing. Now I see I understood nothing." The translation network was not the only system failing. On the outer worlds, navigation beacons began reporting incorrect coordinates. 3 ships collided in a busy shipping lane because their guidance systems directed them to the same location. 12 crew members died. An investigation revealed that the beacon maintenance schedule had been managed by a human logistics network. The beacons themselves were Council technology, but the humans had volunteered to service them because no one else wanted the tedious job. They had done it so well that everyone forgot it needed doing. Now, with the humans gone, no one knew which beacons needed maintenance or when. The technical manuals were available, but they were written in dry, technical language that assumed extensive background knowledge. The humans had simplified the work through experience and intuition. Their absence turned routine maintenance into advanced engineering. Counselor Zinara called an emergency session 3 weeks after the departure. Her usually luminous form looked dim with stress. "We have a crisis," she announced. "The Helix Medical Station in Sector 12 has run out of Rinth serum. Over 4,000 patients need it to survive. The next supply shipment is not scheduled for 2 months. Contact the usual suppliers," Rixtala said. The usual supplier was the Human Medical Corps. Zinara replied quietly. They operated a network of medical supply ships that filled gaps in the commercial distribution system. They did not charge for the service. They simply saw a need and met it. No one else knew the work was being done. The chamber fell silent. Rixtala's crystalline form seemed to dim slightly. "Find an alternative supplier. Pay commercial rates, if necessary." Zinara's color shifted to a deep blue that indicated sorrow. "I have tried. Commercial suppliers say it will take 6 weeks to arrange transport. Many of the patients will die before then." "What about our own council medical ships?" Markel asked. "We have 3, Zinara said. "They are designed for emergency response to major disasters, not routine supply distribution." The humans operated 47 medical supply vessels. "We never built our own, because the human service was so reliable." The deaths at Helix Station numbered 234 before an emergency shipment arrived. The council held a moment of silence for the dead. Several members suggested sending a message to humanity, asking for help. The motion was voted down. Pride would not allow them to beg so soon. The problems multiplied. The Zephron Collective, a highly advanced species that prided themselves on their technology, discovered that their quantum communication array was failing. The system was their own invention, but humans had been contracted to maintain it 15 years ago, because the work required someone to physically travel to remote relay stations scattered across uninhabited systems. The humans had done the job cheerfully, treating it as an adventure. Young human engineers had volunteered for the lonely assignments, spending months alone in space to keep the network functioning. They had been paid, but their pay had been modest. They had done the work because it needed doing, and because they enjoyed the challenge. Now, the relay stations were failing, and the Zephron engineers who tried to service them found the work nearly impossible. The stations were in difficult locations, near black holes, inside nebulae, in systems with dangerous radiation. The humans had developed specialized techniques for working in these environments. Their manuals existed, but reading about a procedure and performing it in harsh conditions were very different things. 2 Zephron engineers died when their ship's shielding failed near a pulsar. They had been attempting to service a relay station that a human team had maintained without incident for over a decade. The Saffron Collective mourned their loss and quietly began considering whether to simply abandon the distant stations and accept a smaller communication network. On the Council's central world, Administrator Pelquin managed the vast bureaucracy that kept galactic civilization running. She was reviewing reports when she noticed a pattern. Processing times for everything were increasing. Permit applications that used to take days now took weeks. Trade disputes that had been resolved quickly now dragged on. Resource allocation decisions were delayed. She dug deeper and found the cause. The Council employed thousands of administrators from dozens of species, but the workflow systems that kept everything running smoothly had been designed and managed by humans. The systems still worked, but they required constant adjustment to handle special cases and unexpected situations. The humans had done this adjustment work invisibly, often during their off hours, treating it as a puzzle to solve rather than a burden. They had automated what they could and handled the rest with efficient teamwork. Now, without them, the bureaucracy was slowly choking on its own complexity. Pelquin brought the issue to the Council. "We need to hire additional staff," she explained. "Perhaps triple our current workforce to handle the tasks the humans were managing." Triple? Brekthor's voice was incredulous. How many humans were doing this work? Pelquin checked her records. 73. The number hung in the air. 73 humans had been doing the work that would now require over 2,000 Council employees. And the humans had done it better, faster, and without complaint. As the second month of humanity's absence began, a pattern became clear to anyone paying attention. Humans had not controlled critical systems or held the galaxy hostage. They had simply made themselves useful in 1,000 small ways, taking on tasks that were tedious, difficult, or thankless. They had done it so well and so quietly that their work had become invisible. Now that they were gone, the invisible was becoming all too visible. The smooth operation of galactic civilization had not been natural or automatic. It had been maintained by a species that had asked only to be treated fairly in return. Rixtala sat in her chambers, reviewing reports of mounting problems. She had ruled the Council for 3 centuries and had never felt uncertain. Now, for the first time, she wondered if the Council had made a mistake. But pride is a powerful force. She drafted no message to humanity. She authorized no apology. Instead, she issued directives to hire more workers, train more technicians, and adapt to the new reality. The galaxy would endure. It always had. But as she worked late into the night, Rixtala could not shake the feeling that something essential had been lost, something that could not be replaced by simply hiring more staff or writing more procedures. The humans had not just worked hard, they had cared. And caring, she was beginning to understand, was not something that could be mandated or replaced. 6 months had passed since the humans left, and the galaxy was unraveling like a worn thread pulled too hard. The war started in the Kelmar region, a cluster of systems where 3 species had competed for resources for generations. The Kelthans, the Vosari, and the Namiri had maintained a tense peace through a complex web of trade agreements and territorial understandings. Small disputes flared regularly, but they had always been contained. What no one outside the region knew was that a human diplomatic team had been stationed there for 8 decades. The team consisted of only 4 people, rotating every 10 years, but they had been essential. They mediated minor disputes before they grew. They facilitated communication between species that despised each other. They found creative solutions to problems that seemed impossible. The humans had never advertised their work. They had simply been there, day after day, preventing small fires from becoming infernos. When they left, the mediation stopped. Within 2 months, a minor mining dispute over an asteroid field escalated into armed conflict. The Kelthans fired first, destroying a Vosari processing station. The Vosari retaliated by attacking Kelthan colony ships. The Namiri, seeing opportunity, launched raids against both sides. Within weeks, the conflict had drawn in allied species, and a regional war was burning across 12 systems. The Council sent peacekeepers, but they lacked the relationships and trust that the human diplomats had built over decades. Both sides rejected Council mediation, accusing them of bias. The war continued, claiming thousands of lives each week. Councillor Mursath reviewed the casualty reports with growing horror. "Did we even know the humans were doing diplomatic work in Kelmar?" she asked during a closed session. Felkar checked the records. There was a human consulate there, yes. It was mentioned in reports. But we assumed it was a token presence, not an active peacekeeping mission. "We assumed wrong," Mursath said quietly. "About many things." The war was not the only disaster. On the agricultural world of Primtar, a plague appeared among the livestock that provided protein for billions across 7 systems. The disease spread rapidly, killing entire herds in days. The Primtar authorities called for help, but the response was slow and confused. When humans had been part of the galaxy, the Human Medical Corps would have responded immediately. They maintained rapid response teams, trained in xenobiology, capable of reaching any system within 72 hours. They would have contained the plague, identified its source, and developed a treatment protocol. But the Medical Corps was gone. The Council's own medical services were designed for different purposes. By the time they organized a response team with the right expertise, 3 weeks had passed. The plague had spread to 4 neighboring worlds. The death toll among livestock numbered in the hundreds of millions, and food shortages were beginning to affect civilian populations. Dr. Selvana, a Pelthine epidemiologist, worked around the clock trying to understand the plague. She had trained alongside human doctors and had learned from them. Now, facing the crisis alone, she realized how much she had depended on their expertise. The humans would have recognized this pathogen immediately, she told her exhausted team. They kept extensive databases of diseases from thousands of worlds. They cross-referenced everything. "We are working blind, trying to reinvent protocols they had perfected decades ago." When the treatment was finally developed, 2 months had passed. The economic damage was catastrophic. 7 systems faced famine. Ration systems were implemented. There were riots on 3 worlds. The Council had to divert massive resources to prevent starvation. The emergency sessions became constant. Rixtala barely left the Council chambers anymore. Each day brought new reports of systems failing, conflicts escalating, disasters spreading unchecked. The asteroid mining accident in the Trell sector was particularly devastating. A structural failure in a mining platform killed 3,000 workers when the facility decompressed. The platform was old, but had been considered safe because it underwent regular inspections and maintenance. The investigation revealed that human rescue services had been stationed in the sector for decades. They had not just responded to emergencies, they had conducted proactive safety reviews, identifying potential problems before they became deadly. They had trained local teams, provided equipment, and shared expertise. When the platform began to fail, the distress call went out. In the past, human rescue ships would have been there in hours, with the specialized equipment needed to save workers trapped in damaged sections. This time, the nearest Council rescue ship was 2 days away, and it lacked the proper tools for deep space industrial rescue. By the time help arrived, all 3,000 workers were dead. They had suffocated slowly in sealed compartments, waiting for a rescue that came too late. Councillor Breckthor, who had cheered the loudest when humans left, stood before the memorial wall listing the names of the dead. He was Korthan, a warrior species that valued strength and self-sufficiency. He had believed the galaxy did not need human help, that they had been parasites taking more than they gave. Now he saw the truth written in 3,000 names. The humans had not been taking, they had been giving, constantly, in ways so fundamental that their absence was killing people. The Galactic Archives became a place of pilgrimage for troubled council members. The vast database held records of every significant event in galactic history. A team of researchers began compiling a list of human contributions over the past 2 centuries. The list took weeks to complete and filled hundreds of data files. Humanitarian missions, 14,000. Infrastructure maintenance projects, 32,000. Diplomatic interventions, 8,000. Medical emergencies responded to, over 50,000. Technology shared freely, impossible to count. The researchers found something else in the archives. Over the past 50 years, there had been 112 resolutions or regulations specifically limiting human activities. Every single one had been justified as necessary to prevent human overreach or to protect other species from human competition. The humans had complied with each restriction. They had reduced their territory when told. They had limited their resource extraction. They had accepted quotas on their population growth. And through it all, they had continued to serve, to help, to give. Resolution 8847 had not been uniquely terrible. It had been uniquely final. Councillor Zinara presented the findings to a somber council chamber. "We did not just restrict them," she said, her translucent form flickering with emotions her species rarely showed publicly. "We punished them for being generous. Every time they helped, we saw it as evidence they were growing too powerful. Every time they solved a problem we could not, we resented them for it. We turned their greatest strength into their greatest liability." "They could have fought back," Markel said quietly. "They could have threatened us. They could have used their position to demand respect. But they never did." "No," Zinara agreed. "They simply left. And in leaving, they taught us what we refused to learn while they were here. We needed them far more than they needed us." The council attempted to send messages to humanity. The transmissions were broadcast on all frequencies, directed toward the galactic northwest, where the humans had gone. The messages ranged from simple requests for communication to formal apologies. There was no response. The silence from the darkness was complete. As the first year of humanity's absence approached, the Galactic Council that had stood for 10,000 years was fracturing. Member species were withdrawing to their own territories, unwilling to contribute resources to solve problems that seemed endless. Trade was collapsing. Technology development had stalled. Wars were spreading. The great civilization that had once spanned the galaxy was contracting, growing smaller and darker, like a star dying slowly in the void. And somewhere beyond the borders of Council space, humanity remained silent, neither gloating nor helping, simply existing beyond the reach of those who had never truly valued them. The galaxy was learning a hard lesson. Those who give freely are not obligated to give forever. The decision to search for humanity was not made easily. It took 18 months of deteriorating conditions before the Council finally authorized an expedition. Pride had to be swallowed, and for some species, that was harder than starvation. Rix Tala appointed Councillor Mursath to lead the mission. The Quilon diplomat had been one of the few voices arguing for restraint regarding Resolution 8847. She had also worked closely with humans during her long career, and spoke of them with respect rather than resentment. The expedition consisted of 5 ships representing different council species. The fleet was small but well-equipped, carrying supplies, gifts, and most importantly, a message of apology drafted by the council itself. The message had taken 3 months to write, and had required 17 revisions before all member species would agree to it. Mursath read the final version and felt only sadness. The apology was formal, diplomatic, and carefully worded to avoid admitting too much fault. It was the kind of document that satisfied everyone and meant nothing. But it was all the council could agree upon, so she carried it with her into the unknown. The fleet followed the trajectory the human exodus had taken, moving into regions of space that had never been properly surveyed. The journey took months. They passed through empty systems, navigated asteroid fields, and skirted the edges of dangerous phenomena. 3 months into the search, they found the first sign. A navigation beacon, clearly human in design, floating in an otherwise empty system. It transmitted a simple message. Warning, Council vessels not welcome beyond this point. Turn back. Mersath called a conference with the other ship captains. We have come too far to turn back now, she said, but we must proceed carefully. We are not here to invade. We are here to talk. They continued forward, and the beacons became more frequent. Some simply marked navigation hazards. Others repeated the warning. The fleet pressed on, and after another month, they detected something extraordinary. A massive space station appeared on their sensors, far larger than anything the Council had ever built. As they approached, they saw it was only one of several, arranged in a defensive grid around a G-type star. The system contained 6 planets, 3 of them showing clear signs of habitation and terraforming. A message arrived before they could send their own. The voice was human, female, calm and professional. Council vessels, you have entered the new Terran system. You were warned to turn back. State your purpose. Mersath responded personally. I am Counselor Mersath of the Quilon Federation, representing the Galactic Council. We come seeking dialogue with humanity. We bring a message from the Council, and hope for reconciliation. There was a long pause. Then, you may approach the 3rd planet. Follow the navigation beacon. Any deviation from the prescribed course will be considered hostile. Any weapons lock will be met with immediate defensive action. Understand that you are entering sovereign human territory. Council authority holds no weight here. The fleet followed the beacon to a planet that took Mersath's breath away. It was beautiful. A world of blue oceans, green continents, and swirling white clouds. Cities were visible from orbit, along with vast agricultural zones and what appeared to be nature reserves. The development was sophisticated, but harmonious with the natural environment. They were directed to land at a spaceport outside a coastal city. As the ships descended, Mersath saw more evidence of human civilization. The architecture was distinctly human, but refined, incorporating styles from hundreds of Earth cultures. Parks and gardens were everywhere. The city looked peaceful and prosperous. A delegation met them at the landing field. 10 humans, ranging in age from young adults to elderly, dressed in simple but elegant clothing. They were polite, offering refreshments and comfortable seating, but their demeanor was formal and distant. The leader of the human delegation introduced herself as Ambassador Chen Wei. She was a middle-aged woman with gray-streaked hair and eyes that had seen much. Welcome to New Terra, she said. You have traveled a long way. Please, share your message. Mersath presented the Council's formal apology. Chen Wei read it carefully, her expression neutral. When she finished, she set it aside and looked at the Council delegation with something that might have been pity. Thank you for this. I will ensure the Council's words are recorded in our archives. But before we respond, perhaps you should see what humanity has built in the time since we left. Over the next 3 days, the Council delegation was given a tour of human space. They visited 5 different colony worlds, each one thriving. They saw farms producing abundant food, factories creating advanced technology, universities teaching thousands of students, and hospitals providing care to all who needed it. They saw a society that had learned from both human history and from 2 centuries of galactic contact. The humans had taken the best ideas from dozens of species and blended them with their own innovations. They had built something remarkable. What struck Mersath most was the happiness she observed. People walked without fear. Children played in parks. Artists created. Scientists discovered. There was no sense of desperation or suffering. The humans had built paradise, not through exploitation or oppression, but through cooperation and hard work. On the fourth day, the council delegation met with the Human Government Council, a body of 30 representatives elected from across human space. They gathered in a simple but elegant chamber, and Ambassador Chen Wei spoke for them. "We appreciate your visit," she began, "and we acknowledge the Council's apology. But words alone cannot undo 2 centuries of experience. When humanity joined the Galactic Council, we came with hope and goodwill. We wanted to be partners, to contribute, to learn and grow together with other species." She paused, letting her words settle. "Instead, we were tolerated. We were useful, so we were allowed to exist. But we were never truly welcomed. Every success was viewed with suspicion. Every expansion was seen as aggression. Every strength was treated as a threat." Mursath began to speak, but Chen Wei raised a hand gently. "Please, let me finish. We tried to prove ourselves for 200 years. We helped anyone who asked. We shared our knowledge freely. We took on the jobs no one else wanted. We mediated conflicts, responded to disasters, maintained systems, and saved lives. We thought that if we just worked hard enough, gave enough, we would finally be accepted as equals. Resolution 8847 taught us the truth," Chen Wei continued, her voice hardening slightly. "No matter what we did, you would never see us as equals. You would always see us as something to be controlled, restricted, managed. The resolution itself was not uniquely cruel. It was simply the clearest expression of what the Council had always felt about us." The human ambassadors stood and walked to a window overlooking the city. "So we left. We did not leave in anger, though we had reason for it. We did not leave to punish you, though we knew our departure would cause difficulties. We left because we finally understood that we could not make you respect us. Respect must be freely given, or it is worthless." She turned back to face the delegation. "You have come here seeking our help. You want us to return and solve the problems the galaxy faces. But those problems are not our responsibility anymore. We built our own civilization, here, beyond your borders. We are happy. We are free. We are valued for who we are, not for what we can do for others." Mursath felt tears forming in her eyes, a rare occurrence for her species. "We were wrong," she said simply. "I was wrong. I saw what was happening, but did not fight hard enough to stop it. The galaxy is falling apart without you, and we deserve it. But there are billions of innocent people suffering for the Council's mistakes. Is there nothing we can offer to convince you to help?" Chen Wei's expression softened slightly. "We are not monsters, Counselor, but we also know that if we return now, nothing will change. The Council will accept our help, take what it needs, and then slowly begin restricting us again. The cycle would repeat. What can we do to prove we have changed?" Mursath asked desperately. "Change," Chen Wei said simply. "Actually change. Learn to solve your own problems. Build your own systems. Stop depending on others to maintain your civilization. When you have built something real, something sustainable, something that does not require humanity to function, then perhaps we can talk about partnership. But not before." The meeting ended. The Council delegation was escorted back to their ships with courtesy but firmness. As Mursath's fleet departed the new Terran system, she looked back at the beautiful planets humanity had built and felt overwhelming sorrow. They had come seeking saviors and found independent people living their own lives. The galaxy had lost them, and the galaxy would have to learn to survive without them. Mursath returned to Council space after 8 months of travel. Her report was delivered to a chamber that held only half the members it once had. Dozens of species had withdrawn from active participation, sending only token representatives while they focused on their own survival. She stood at the central podium, looking at the diminished gathering, and delivered her findings without embellishment. The humans were thriving. They had built a civilization beyond council borders that was prosperous, peaceful, and entirely self-sufficient. They had politely but firmly declined to return. The chamber received this news in silence. There were no outbursts, no angry denunciations. The fight had gone out of the council. 2 years of cascading failures had taught them humility the hard way. "Did they make any demands?" Rixtala asked, her crystalline form looking dimmer than Mursath remembered. "Any conditions under which they might reconsider?" "Only one," Mursath replied. "They asked us to change, to actually change, not just apologize. They will not return until we have proven we can maintain our own civilization without depending on them." Brekthor, the Korthan counselor, who had once celebrated humanity's departure, spoke for the first time in months. His voice was hollow. "They have condemned us to death, then. We cannot change fast enough. The galaxy is already dying." "The galaxy is not dying," Mursath corrected gently. "It is changing. We must change with it, or be left behind." But change came slowly, and the deterioration continued. The war in the Kelmar region had spread to involve 18 systems. The plague that had devastated Primtar's livestock had mutated and jumped to 3 other agricultural worlds. The translation network had degraded to the point where real-time communication between different species was nearly impossible. Trade, the lifeblood of galactic civilization, contracted by 40% in the first year after humanity left. By the second year, it had collapsed by 70%. Worlds that had depended on imports to feed their populations faced starvation. Medicines stopped flowing. Technology stopped advancing. The Council tried to implement solutions. They hired thousands of new workers to replace the humans who had left. They allocated massive budgets to infrastructure repair. They created new agencies to handle humanitarian crises. But nothing worked as well as it had when humans had been quietly managing these systems. Part of the problem was capability. Humans had brought unique skills and perspectives that were difficult to replicate. But a larger part was motivation. The humans had done their work because they cared about doing it well, not because they were paid to do it. They had taken personal pride in solving problems and helping others. The replacements the Council hired were competent, but lacked that deep commitment. They did their jobs adequately, but no more. They followed procedures, but did not improve them. They responded to crises, but did not prevent them. The difference between adequate and excellent was the difference between a functioning civilization and a dying one. 6 months after Mursath's return, something unexpected happened. The Delphini Unity, the only species that had voted with humans against Resolution 8847, announced they were leaving Council space. Their ambassador delivered a brief statement. "We joined the Council to be part of a great civilization. That civilization no longer exists. We will seek our fortune elsewhere." The Delphini were followed by 3 smaller species who had worked closely with humans. They did not announce where they were going, but the direction of their departure made it clear. They were heading toward human space, hoping to find acceptance there. The Council could do nothing to stop them. They had no authority beyond their own borders, and increasingly, they had little authority even within them. Rixtala called a private meeting with the remaining senior counselors. Only 5 attended. Mursath, Thelkar, Zinara, Markel, and surprisingly, Brekthor. They met in a small chamber rather than the Grand Hall, a symbolic acknowledgement of how far the Council had fallen. "We must face reality," Rixtala said. "The Galactic Council as we knew it is finished. We lack the resources to maintain it, the authority to enforce our decisions, and the will to continue pretending everything is fine." "What are you proposing?" Markel asked. "Dissolution," Rixtala said simply. "We formally acknowledge that the centralized council has failed. We allow member species to govern themselves, form their own alliances, and find their own path forward. Perhaps from the ashes of this failure, something better will eventually grow. The proposal was shocking, but no one argued against it. They all knew it was inevitable. The vote to dissolve the Galactic Council took place 3 months later. Of the 200 species that had once been members, only 87 said representatives. The vote was unanimous. 10,000 years of unified galactic government ended not with drama, but with weary acceptance. In the wake of dissolution, the galaxy fragmented. Some species formed regional alliances, others withdrew into isolation. A few continued fighting wars that no longer had any larger purpose. Many struggled simply to survive. But something else happened too. Some species began reaching out to humanity individually, not as council representatives, but as sovereign peoples seeking friendship. They came with genuine respect, acknowledging past mistakes, and asking only for the chance to build new relationships. The humans considered each approach carefully. They accepted some and declined others, judging each species by their actions rather than their words. The Delphini unity was welcomed warmly. Their colony ships were guided to systems near human space, and trade agreements were negotiated as equals. Other species who had treated humans with consistent fairness during the council years were also welcomed. Slowly, a new network of alliances began to form, based not on centralized authority, but on mutual respect and voluntary cooperation. The Quilon Federation, Mersat's own species, was among those accepted. She had advocated for humans when it was unpopular, and the humans remembered. When she visited New Terra again, this time as an ambassador from an independent nation, rather than a council representative, she was greeted as a friend. "You tried to help us when few others would," Ambassador Chen Wei told her. "That means something." Not all species were welcomed. Those that had been most aggressive in restricting humanity, most contemptuous in their treatment, found their overtures politely declined. The humans bore no grudges, but they also had no interest in repeating past mistakes. Brekthor came personally to human space, his pride finally broken by the collapse of his own civilization. The Korthon systems were suffering badly without the infrastructure humanity had maintained. He stood before the Human Council and did something no Korthon leader had done in their species' history. He apologized. "I was wrong," he said, his voice carrying the weight of personal and civilizational failure. "I believed strength meant never depending on others. I believed accepting help was weakness. I mocked you for being generous and called it foolishness. Now my people are dying because I was too proud to see the truth." The Human Council deliberated for 3 days before responding. When they did, it was Ambassador Chen Wei who spoke. "We will send humanitarian aid to the Korthon systems, medical supplies, food, and technical assistance for critical infrastructure. We do this not to humiliate you, but because people are suffering, and we can help." "What do you want in return?" Brekthor asked, confused. In his worldview, no one helped without expecting payment. "We want you to learn the lesson you should have learned 2 centuries ago," Chen Wei replied. "Accepting help is not weakness. Giving help is not foolishness. Civilization is built on cooperation, not dominance. If you truly understand that now, our aid will help you rebuild. If you do not, no amount of aid will save you." Brekthor left human space with ships full of supplies, and a new understanding of what strength really meant. 5 years after humanity's departure, the galaxy was unrecognizable. The Great Council was gone. Some species had collapsed entirely. Others had formed new alliances. A few had thrived by adapting quickly. Humanity had become the center of a new civilization, one built on different principles than the old council. The humans did not rule this new network. They participated as equals with their allies, solving problems together rather than alone. The galaxy had learned, painfully and slowly, that those who give freely can also choose to walk away. That generosity is a gift, not an obligation. That respect cannot be demanded, only earned. And that sometimes the only way to be valued is to refuse to be taken for granted. In the council's old capital, the grand chamber stood empty and dark. Rixtala visited it one final time before retiring to her homeworld. She stood in the center of the vast space, remembering when it had been filled with representatives from across the galaxy, when it had been the heart of a great civilization. "We had something precious," she said to the empty chamber, "and we threw it away because we could not see its value. Let this place stand as a monument to our failure, so that those who come after might learn from our mistakes." She left the chamber and never returned. The building was sealed, left as a reminder of what pride costs when it blinds you to truth. And somewhere beyond the old borders, on beautiful planets circling distant stars, humanity continued to thrive, neither gloating nor bitter, simply living their lives in peace and freedom. They had asked for nothing but fairness. When they did not receive it, they had walked away with dignity. And in doing so, they had taught the galaxy a lesson that 10,000 years of council rule never had. That the measure of civilization is not in how much you can take from others, but in how much you can give freely, and how gracefully you can walk away when your gifts are not valued. The galaxy had learned the lesson too late to save what it had. But perhaps, given time, it could build something better from the ashes of its pride.